Oh, hello there.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. So, Alec, I got a question for you.
Okay.
What do Instagram, TikTok, Grey's Anatomy, Ethics, Jaws, and Netflix have in common?
I have no idea. What do they have in common, Ryan?
They're all different types of research our students are doing here. So welcome on into the 9th edition of Longwood University's Communication Studies Department presents live original streaming research here. Since this is our 9th time doing this, I did a little bit of research. We've had over 470 students participate, about 40 more this year, put us over 500.
Wow.
We've had 3 professors participate, a little less exciting. We've had 3 department chairs participate.
Wow.
We've had over 5,600 views on YouTube from you, and we've done this in locations from the studio to students' houses on Zoom during COVID to live from Blackwell Hall right here where we are today on the campus of Longwood University. So, Alec, what kind of research are our students doing?
Well, Ryan, we've got 2 different forms of research going on here. We have quantitative research and we have qualitative research. My section is the qualitative research. They do interviews with students, looking for patterns among those interviews and looking for themes that come from that. Ryan, what is your students doing?
Our students are doing quantitative research here. So we also look for patterns, but we look for large patterns, right? And we're not interested in the outliers. We're not interested in the Tom Bradys of the world. We are looking for what the majority of people do in the majority of situations here. We did a survey, and you hear a little bit about both your results and our results as we continue along. The other interesting thing about this is an entirely student-produced production here. So let's go to the behind-the-scenes camera. And hey, student crew, please give a wave there. You can see many of them. You will get to see between presentations what they're up to and how they're bringing this program to you. Plus, we have some fancy new technology this year that'll let us visit downstairs. In addition to our communication studies students here doing their research presentations today, it is Research Day on the campus of Longwood University. And so we're going to go downstairs between presentations. There we go. That will fill up soon. And we will interview some of them and see what students from other disciplines are doing here and hear from some of their projects and things of that nature. You ready to get started?
I'm ready if you are.
It is Research Day, so live from Blackwell Hall, let's get started.
my name is Anna Davis.
And I'm Lily Beverley.
And we did our Com 460 research on the impact short-form entertainment has on college-age individuals.
Like Anna stated before, we did our impact on how short-form entertainment has its effects on attention spans of college-age individuals. What makes our study unique is that short-form entertainment is growing so rapidly with limited data and awareness about how harmful large consumption can be on the attention spans of college-age individuals. For our theory, we chose the cognitive load theory. The cognitive load theory is when attention declines when demands are placed on working memory are too much for its capacity. This helps us measure how large consumption can have its effects on attention span.
For our research, we had 4 constructs, the first being short-form entertainment usage. This just helped to describe what short-form entertainment was, which is bite-sized videos, usually less than 60 seconds. Our second construct was sustained attention. This is the ability to hold attention on a task over a long period of time. This is very important for cognitive processing and for our target audience of college-age individuals. Our third construct was addictive short-form entertainment usage. Individuals deemed as addicted when they have trouble disengaging with short-form entertainment and watch large volumes of it. And lastly, our final construct was the types of engagement. This just is how someone would interact with short-form entertainment, whether that be passive, which is when you scroll aimlessly and don't really interact, or active, when you like, comment, subscribe, or share.
And for our hypothesis, we wanted to focus on 3 main groups: active and passive consumption of short-form entertainment, and what they're doing on these platforms, such as liking, commenting, or sharing, and what platforms they are engaging on. And we found 2 out of 3 of these hypotheses to be significant.
For our methodology, we did a 13-question survey, and it took participants roughly 2 to 3 minutes to finish. A sample question that we had was, how do you interact with short-form entertainment? Once we gathered all of our data, we had 116 valid responses, and we targeted recipients who were ages of 18 to 24. For our demographics, majority of our sample was female and those aging from 21 to 22. And we found that the most used platform was TikTok.
For the 2 constructs that we wanted to highlight, one being the short-form entertainment usage and the second being the types of engagement. For the short-form entertainment usage, we found that higher usage showed shorter attention spans, and we found this study to be significant. For the types of engagement, we wanted to study between active and passive users. Active users being users that are liking, commenting, and sharing and engaging with the content, as passive users are just mindlessly scrolling. And we found that active users have shorter attention spans than passive users, and we found this study to be significant.
Going off of that, we did run into a few limitations. First being our sample size. Majority of our sample were females attending Longwood University. Our second limitation was scale consistency. We found that throughout our survey, some of the scales slightly differed. And lastly, our limitation was our open-ended question. This question led to a majority of our responses being invalid. For future research, we would like to compare short-form entertainment platforms and long-form entertainment platforms and why a person would prefer one over the other. A second one that we would like to do is comparing different age groups, so whether that be middle schoolers, high schoolers, or the older ages. And lastly, we would like to target specifically non-TikTok users because we found that majority of our sample preferred TikTok.
Thank you, Anna. And lastly, for our discussion, our takeaway 1, active short-form users demonstrate shorter attention spans. We found this significant because active users are the users who are engaging in the content. They're liking, commenting, and sharing, which is making them more engaged and invested in the content, which is making them use it more, which is making it more addictive, showing that they have shorter attention spans than the passive users who are just mindlessly scrolling on the content.
And our final takeaway is that user engagement and attention span are not determined by the short-form entertainment platform. We found this very interesting because, like we had stated earlier, majority of our sample preferred and used TikTok more frequently, but their attention spans stayed the same.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lily Stohlman. I conducted this research with Ella VanLuvender, who is unfortunately unable to join me today due to illness, but we studied and collected data on social media and political echo chambers. The prevalence of echo chambers on social media and the tolerance of political ideologies is what we researched, and we found that this research collection was unique because we investigated individuals' engagement rates with political content and did not find previous research on this subject matter. The theories that we used included groupthink, which is the desire for group cohesion outweighs critical thinking and leads to irrational decision making. We also used the group polarization theory, which says that decisions of a group are not actually the average of individual opinions, but rather a more extreme outcome. We used both of these theories and analyzed them in combination with politics and social media. So some constructs that we were looking at were filter bubbles, which are essentially a part of social media's algorithm, and they help determine the types of content shown on a user's social media feed. We also used post interactions, which are your likes, comments, shares, and reposts, views as well, and these also influence social media's algorithm. We also used political ideology, which is a set of beliefs about how society should be organized, and our political ideologies were on the liberal to conservative spectrum. We also utilize echo chambers, which are communication environments which only show opinions that align with one's pre-existing beliefs. So for our first hypothesis, we predicted that if users actively engage with political materials on social media, then they are more likely to encounter political echo chambers. We found results relating to this hypothesis to be significant. We also, for our second hypothesis, we predicted that if an individual encounters political material on social media that does not align with their own views, then they will react negatively. We did not find these results to be significant. For our post hoc hypothesis, we predicted that if an individual spends more time on social media, they will feel more comfortable engaging with political content on social media. These results were found to be significant. So we conducted a Qualtrics survey which took approximately 3 minutes, and it was distributed via text messaging, email, word of mouth, and social media. An example of a demographics question that we utilized in this survey is, what is your political orientation? We collected data with a total of 108 respondents. They were required to be 18 years old and a registered voter in the United States. For our demographics, we found that the overwhelming majority were female at 71%, and 29% of respondents were male. We found that 90% of respondents were white and 7% were multiracial. There were other races with it collected that the data was collected on. However, these were just the overwhelming majorities. Age groups collected were 18 to 24, which made up 54% of our data, and 55 plus, which made up 17% of our data, and there were additional ages that data was collected on as well. For our discussion, we wanted to focus on political ideology and post interactions. So relating to political ideology, we found that political content opposite to a user's views was oftentimes met with negativity. This can be evidenced by our Pearson's correlation test, which showed a significant weak to moderate correlation between engagement with political posts on social media and time spent on social media. So for example, someone who spends more time on social media will still interact with posts negatively. And for post interactions, we found that interactions on social media posts increased with the time a user spent on social media. And this can be evidenced by our 2 sample t-test showing either a liberal or conservative, showing negative reactions from each. And so essentially somebody who spends more time on social media will interact more. Some limitations of our research were that we just did not ask enough questions. We also found that our sample was not racially diverse, as a majority were white females, and we also did not have enough data collection, so we had to change our second hypothesis. For future research, we would like to research gender's impact on social media. We would also like to research the impact of age on frequency of post interactions, and we would like to research the impact of type of political content on a feed and time spent on social media sites. So for our discussion and key takeaway number 1, we would like to highlight that engagement with political posts does not impact the prevalence of echo chambers. And for our key takeaway number 2, we found that individuals are more likely to engage on posts with the more time they spend on social media. Thank you so much.
was a fabulous job you did up there. Unfortunately, your partner couldn't make it today. Where is she at the moment?
I believe she's at her house. Sick, unfortunately. But I'm really happy that I got to conduct the research with her. She was a great group member, and it's just unfortunate that she couldn't be here today, but I had a great time working with her throughout the semester. Shout out Ella.
That is awesome. You did a great job right there, too. You also have another event to schedule this evening here, too. What else is on your docket today?
Lacrosse game, come out to EBJ at 5 p.m. where your Longwood Lancers take on the Radford Highlanders.
Awesome. Thanks, Lily. Let's go. We'll have McKayla and Kayleigh up shortly.
everyone, I'm McKayla Moxcey,
Hey y'all, I'm Kayleigh Kiefer.
and our research is about the impact of a film's sound design on audience emotional connection.
So just like McKayla said, our study examines how sound design influences audience's emotional connection with a film. So while you're watching a film, what are all the different emotions you're feeling? Are you happy? Are you sad? And so on and so forth. And the reason why we wanted to study this is because there's been so many research studies in the past that have either just focused on sound design or music, but not together. And both McKayla and I really wanted to focus on how both sound design and music as a whole affect somebody's emotion while they're watching a film. Now, the theory we used is reception theory by Hall. Now, Hall's theory for reception theory is all about encoding and decoding. So while you're watching a film, what are you taking in? What are you encoding? What are you learning from it? But then after you finish watching the film, you're decoding. So what are you taking away from the film that you can use in your everyday life?
For our research, we had 4 main constructs, our first one being audience demographics. We decided to look at the difference between cinephiles and casual watchers. We define cinephiles as people who actively engage with film techniques, while casual film watchers are just people who watch films for entertainment or the emotions they get from a film, and so on. Our second construct is emotional engagement. We define this as the feelings that people feel while watching a film. For us, that is sound design, so we wanted to explore the way the sound design in a film makes people feel while they're watching it.
Our third construct is storytelling, the way a film expresses the narrative of plot. So while you're watching in the middle, beginning, and end, what is the overall storyline of it? So we also looked at the sound design adds to storytelling without the need of dialogue. So while you're watching a film, if there's a sad moment, instead of adding extra dialogue, add a sad moment, and that brings an emotional connection to it. And our fourth construct is genre. A genre defines the setting of a film and the elements used in it. So some examples of a genre is horror, action, romance, and genre-specific sound design guides audience interpretation of auditory cues. For example, if you think of horror, you think of scary sounds. But if you think of action, you think a lot of like pows and then so on and so forth.
We had two main predictions for our research, the first one being the emotional connection to a film's sound design will be greater for cinephiles than casual viewers. We did find this data to be significant. Our second prediction was the more memorable the sound design is, the more the audience will engage with the film's genre and story. We also found this data to be significant, and it had a significant moderate correlation between the two of them. Our last hypothesis was casual film watchers watch more film genres than cinephiles. And while this data was significant, we had to reject our hypothesis because it was in the opposite direction of our prediction.
Now, to test our hypothesis, we used the survey method, and our survey was an average length of 4 minutes long, and then we had some sample questions like which best describes you as a movie watcher, and a movie sound design enhances my overall viewing experience. Now, in total, we had 104 participants in our survey. However, only 96 participants were able to be used because either the other 8 participants' data was either not good or they didn't finish the survey all the way in total, and 85% of those 96 participants were in the age range of 18 to 24.
As for our other demographics, 27% of our participants self-identified themselves as cinephiles, while 73% of our participants self-identified themselves as casual film watchers. Majority of our participants were female and white, with the rest of the demographics being made up of other genders and races.
Now, to go back onto our hypothesis, we're going to talk about audience demographics. And our hypothesis for that was the emotional connection to a film's sound design will be greater for cinephiles than casual viewers. And the results from our survey indicated that cinephiles had a greater emotional connection to a film design because they're looking at the more technical elements. They're looking at the editing. They're looking at the sound design. They're looking how the editing helps the sound design tell the story as a whole.
Our second construct, storytelling, went with our second hypothesis. The more memorable the sound design is, the more the audience will engage with the film's genre and story. We found that the more memorable the sound design was, like in movies like Jaws or Star Wars, that audience did engage more and they came back to those movies because the soundtrack left something in them that they came back to.
Now, some limitations and some stuff we would like to see if we did this in the future is, for example, we want to have a more inclusive demographic. For example, 60% of our demographics were female, so in the future we would like to have definitely more genders involved. And then we also want to have a more need of concise survey questions, definitely have a more broad variety of questions. And then we also want to have a more broader number of participants. We're thinking about 150 to 200 more in the future.
And for our future research, we thought it would be interesting to have participants watch a film or clips of films before taking our survey, or take a survey before, have them watch a film, and take a survey after. We also thought it would be interesting to have 2 different surveys, one for cinephiles and one for casual viewers, with questions tailored for both of those demographics. We also thought it would be interesting to have specific genres that we focused on and the sound design within those film genres.
Overall, McKayla and I had 2 major takeaways. And our first major takeaway is that people pay closer attention to film techniques, feel more deeply connected through sound. So for example, cinephiles, they feel more connected because they're looking at, again, the technical elements of everything. But that still doesn't mean that casual film watchers are not still connected to films. They are, they're just not as deeply as cinephiles.
And our second takeaway was that the more memorable the sound design is, the more audiences connect and understand the film. We found that it's true that the more memorable people found the sound design to be in the film, that the more they engaged with it and the more they connected to it and saw themselves in films, and they had nostalgia with films and everything in between. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Jennings.
And my name is Taylor Blount, and today we're discussing the communication phenomenon, political self-disclosure in the undergraduate college classroom. Our study is a study on political self-disclosure based on perceived instructor bias in the undergraduate college classroom. This means we wanted to research how undergraduate college students feel and the comfortability level for their perceived instructor bias. Our research gap that we found was our study is unique due to it being based on the perception and not the reality. Most research that's been completed before was based on the reality of instructor bias, and it wasn't just on undergraduate college research. Ours is fully undergraduate college students. The theory we used was social influence theory. This is any social interaction, norm, and outside perspective that shapes an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Now moving into our literature review, we focused on 4 main constructs, our first being perceived instructor bias, which is the belief that the professor has a political agenda, and this is important because it's the student perception over reality within the classroom. Our second construct is political ideology, which is the system of political beliefs and values, and this shapes the views on issues and policies. For our academic discipline, this is the subject skills and knowledge studied, including majors and minors while at colleges and universities, and this is important because it shapes classroom content and discussions. For our fourth construct, it's the political comfort level, which is the ease and confidence that students have while expressing their political opinions, and this is important because it's the comfort tied to the perceived alignment with the professor. Now moving into our hypotheses, which are pulled from our 4 constructs. Our first hypothesis is that if students perceive their professor as having a radical political opinion, then students are less likely to discuss their political ideology, and this was found as approaching significance. For our second hypothesis, if professors disclose their political ideology in the classroom, then students are more likely to disclose their own political ideology, and this was found statistically significant. And for our post-hypothesis, if students' experiences and upbringing involved prominent political discussion and value discourse, then students are more likely to participate in political class discussions, and this was found not statistically significant.
For our methodology, we used a survey that took about 4 to 5 minutes to complete. We sent this out through social media platforms, Canvas, course messaging, and group organization messages on and off campus. Questions were based on topics of political ideology, discussions, and classroom climate. Some example questions would be, how likely are you to participate in a college course discussion on a 5-point scale, extremely unlikely to extremely likely? Another example would be, what discipline, if any, do you see political bias showing up in? And that's an open-ended question. And the last example was a 7-point scale for you identifying your political ideology from extremely liberal to extremely conservative. For our participants, we had a final number of 67, but this came from 113 respondents. We had to cut this down due to them not finishing the survey or leaving a majority of the questions blank. All of our survey respondents are undergraduate college students, as we stated previous, and our demographics, we had the top 2 genders responded as 12% male and 85% female, and the top 2 degrees being 30% a Bachelor of Arts and 37% a Bachelor of Science, and the top 3 political ideologies, 34% conservative, 13% liberal, and 13% moderate. For our discussion, we chose 2 constructs to bring back and discuss further. We have perceived instructor bias, which was found not statistically significant. Perceived instructor bias is not a key factor in student disclosure. Our evidence for this was perceived bias did not affect student comfort levels. Our open-ended responses showed little impact of perceived instructor bias on participation. Our second hypothesis is political ideology. We found this statistically significant. Professor ideology disclosure is key to student disclosure. Our evidence for this is increased comfort for professor ideology disclosure. Open-ended responses showed that students did find it important that professors were politically discussing their ideology in the classroom, and that if they were disclosing their information, they felt more comfortable doing so for theirs.
Now moving into our limitations in future research, our first limitation is that 40% of participants did not finish our survey. This was either they just answered our first multiple choice question or only answered the multiple choice questions and not our open-ended questions. Our second limitation is the lack of education on political terms. When students answered our open-ended questions, they responded with, "I don't understand what you're asking," or "I'm not quite sure what this means." Then for our third limitation is that our sample was only 85% female, and this was due to our connections that we have here at Longwood while trying to get students to fill out our survey. Now moving into our future research, our first would be to provide a brief political definitions at the beginning of the survey going along with the lack of political education. Then the second would be to target politically related majors like political science rather than keeping it open to all majors. And our third would be to condense the question amount because we believe that if we would have done this, then we would have received a higher completion rate for our survey.
And from our survey, we had two big takeaways from our research. Bias plays a smaller role than expected in classroom participation. We assumed that students would feel that bias would play a large role, but based off our open-ended responses and our research, it does not play a big role. Our second takeaway is prior experiences and upbringing with political discussion does not influence class participation. This is another takeaway that we thought would be the opposite. We assumed that if people came from a background of political discussion and discourse that they would feel more comfortable and that would influence their class participation, but based off our research, that has no correlation. Thank you.
Folks, welcome to the floor of Blackwell Hall where the other disciplines are doing some presentations. And so I'm here with an art display from Art 340 and I'm with
Jillian,
Kaylin, Claire,
Allison.
Beautiful. So Jillian, can you tell me a little bit about what you all did right here?
Yeah, so this is a derelict crab trap. These get lost in the Chesapeake Bay, and our numbers up here on the board, you can see they kill animals that, this is a self-baiting trap, and so the animals just continuously enter the trap after it's lost, and so it just leads to the death of a lot of animals. And so this is we also highlighted there's a program, the National Trap Program. It's a national program and it aims for to get these traps out of the waters to stop harming the animals, and it also increases the number for harvest and the on season. So. Yes.
That's a very cool idea. I love the idea of combining some scientific-based research with an artistic way to display it right here. Where'd you kind of come up with this idea?
So we actually had a speaker come to our class in Dr. Fink's class, Dr. Haven, and he was from, was it William & Mary? Yeah. Yeah, and so we got the idea from his research. We were just inspired by the impact that this has in the waters, you know, so close to us. So we wanted to highlight this and bring awareness to our campus. And we actually got this trap, thanks to Kayleigh. We got it directly from Kirk Havens, and yeah, so this was from the Chesapeake Bay.
That is awesome. So thank you very much. Back to the comm presentations from the balcony.
Hello everyone, I'm Madison Mocello.
I'm McKayla Williams, and today we're talking about the relationship between parasocial relationships and the emotional effect college students feel towards influencers or celebrities.
Now, what we are focusing on is the relationship between parasocial relationship strength and perceived emotional support from social media influencers or celebrities among college-age individuals. Specifically, we are focusing on parasocial relationships, which is a one-sided relationship between viewer and online content creator or celebrity, and how intense or close the viewer feels to said content creator or celebrity. We're also focusing on perceived emotional support, which is what one may feel they receive from their favorite influencer or celebrity. For our survey, we also asked participants at the beginning to identify their favorite influencer or celebrity and think of them as they guide through the questions. As for the theory we use to analyze our data, we use the uses and gratifications theory, which asserts that we as viewers tend to seek out media to gain something in return, whether it may be for entertainment purposes, meeting social needs, whatever that might be, we as people actively seek out media to gain something in return.
So for our study, we looked into 4 key concepts that helped us define parasocial relationships. First being gender, which refers to how male and female differ. Which refers to how male and female define parasocial relationships. This is important to our study because we looked at how male or female form stronger connections or feel more supported by influencers or celebrities. Next is content type, which refers to different types of content, such as short form or long form video, images, and audio. This is important because different types of content may influence how strongly someone connects with an influencer celebrity. Next is social media platform, which is where viewers engage with content, such as Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or YouTube. This is important because different platforms create different viewing experiences, which affect how parasocial relationships may develop. And lastly, social needs, which refers to loneliness, feelings of belonging, or emotional connection. This is important to our study because we studied whether parasocial relationships actually help people meet these needs or just create short-term emotional connection.
Now, as for our hypothesis, we conducted 2 hypotheses and 1 post hoc hypothesis. Our first hypothesis states that students with stronger parasocial relationships will report higher levels of perceived emotional support from influencers or celebrities, which we found to be significant but a weak correlation. Our second hypothesis states that TikTok will report higher levels of parasocial relationships and perceived emotional support than other social media platforms, which we found to have no significance. And finally, our post hoc hypothesis predicted that females will report higher levels of perceived emotional support and parasocial relationships than males from influencers or celebrities, which we found to have significant differences.
So for our study, we conducted a 13-question survey targeted towards college-age students between the ages of 18 and 25, asking about their relationships from influencers and celebrities. So our study was distributed through social media platforms such as Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and through our school email. We had a total of 118 respondents, and after filtering out incomplete responses, we had a total number of 97, 50 of them being males and 65 of them being female.
Now, we did examine 4 constructs, but we'd like to highlight 2 of them, one of them being gender, which draws back to our post hoc hypothesis, which we found significant differences for. This was what we found. We found that females tended to have higher levels of parasocial relationships and perceived emotional support than males. And there are a few factors that could help explain this, one of them being that we did have a majority female sample size, so that could have impacted it a lot, as well as based on our data, we could argue that women may value emotional connections more than men, but again, we did have that majority female sample size. As for social needs, the majority of respondents indicated a short-term emotional response from consuming their favorite influencer celebrities' content. This emotional response could have been happiness, anger, sadness, confusion, whatever that response might be, they felt it after consuming the content for a short period of time. We did have a few respondents indicate little to no effect for other social needs, and some connected to some other social needs being met, but for the most part, the majority had that short-term emotional response.
Now with every study comes limitations. Some limitations we found was having limited time to collect data, only having 2 weeks. We could have had a broader sample size from having more responses. Next is we focused more on emotional responses rather than emotional interactions. And next we had a convenient sample, mainly having Longwood students and family and friends who are our target audience to take the survey. Now for future research, we can do more generational comparisons, such as comparing Gen Z to millennials or millennials to baby boomers to see how they interact with people online. Next, we can focus more on viewer online interactions, such as how much they're liking, commenting, and sharing content, because that can play a part in parasocial relationships. And lastly, we can do more outreach to other demographics, such as age, race, and gender, and maybe having some international responses.
And finally, we'd like to leave you off with 2 key takeaways. Our first key takeaway is that viewers still find value in their favorite influencer or celebrity's content, and this draws back to our first hypothesis, which we found significance for, but it did have a weak correlation. So while viewers might not necessarily feel intensely close to their favorite influencer or celebrity, they still find value in consuming their content. And finally, our last key takeaway is that viewers seek out their favorite influencer or celebrity's content to fulfill short-term emotional needs. And this draws back to our uses and gratifications theory and also our open-ended response question. So in conclusion, we did end up finding interesting connections between parasocial relationships and emotional support. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Braden Emmerson, and my research is on movies and television's influence on career decisions. So over the years, there's been a lot of different research involving media and its influence on careers. However, very few studies have focused particularly on visual media like movies and television. So that's going to be the main focus of my research today. I utilize cultivation theory to help develop my research. Cultivation theory is basically when you watch TV over a long period of time, it actually kind of warps your perception of reality. And the reason this is going to apply to my research is it kind of suggests that movies do, in fact, have an influence over the way that we think. So I have 4 constructs I used for my research. The first being career types. Now, this is the actual career that you see on screen. So if you're watching a show like Cops, it would be the cops, of course. Law and Order, lawyers, all of that. Now, it has been shown in previous research that these shows, when they have careers represented on screen, it actually helps those in the careers and those looking to go into the careers. So we're going to be testing this in my research. The other 3 have to do with representation in media, that being race, gender, and disabilities. All 3 of these have been shown that when they are viewed, they can actually have a positive influence on those in those groups. So for my hypotheses, I have 3. My first hypothesis is the more that you see yourself represented in careers that are on film and television, the more likely you are to pursue those careers. Now, this is going back to that representation that I was talking about earlier. If you see someone that looks like you, talks like you, and acts like you, I wanted to see if that actually has an influence on you pursuing the careers. And as you can see on the slide, it is significant. This means that there was a correlation between representation in media and career decisions. However, I was not so lucky for my other two hypotheses. My second hypothesis was film and television's influence on students pursuing service careers more than STEM careers. Now, a service career, I define that as a career where you're providing a service with a person in person. So basically what that means is for any career where you're interacting with another human, trying to help them out, I would define that as a service career. STEM careers are your typical science, technology, engineering, and math. And yes, you could probably argue that's a service career. However, these careers are happening more on the sidelines and not really interacting one-on-one with people. However, as you can see, this was not significant. This means that even though that yes, both of these had an influence on career decisions, neither one of them had a particular more of an influence than the other. And my final for my post hoc hypothesis, female students are more likely to be influenced by shows and movies featuring medical themes more than other themes. So here, when I was doing my research, I found that there was a lot of nursing majors influenced by medical themes. So these are shows like Grey's Anatomy, The Pitt, all of those shows. So I wanted to see if gender played a role in it, to see if men or women particularly were influenced more by shows like The Pitt and Grey's Anatomy. However, what I found is both were equally, well, close to equally the same. For my methodology, I developed a survey that I sent out to all the Honors College students here on campus, as well as several professors from different disciplines around campus. This was in hopes to get a broad spread of different disciplines to help make my research a little more diverse. Questions usually include things in talking about influence on career, as well as what they want to be when they grow up. Now, as you can see from my demographics, I had an overwhelming majority of females and white students, and service careers was very big compared to STEM. Not as diverse as I would have hoped. Now for my discussion. So career types, I wanted to focus on career types and gender, both of which I was going in expecting this to be a much bigger influence than what was actually turned out for it to be. As you saw in my hypothesis 2 and my post-hoc hypothesis, both of these did not really have that big of an influence on career decision. However, going back to what I found with my nursing students that took my survey, Grey's Anatomy was very, very common. This made me think what exactly about Grey's Anatomy in particular made it so important and influential on students. My running theory is it has to do for the show being such a long-running show that maybe that played a part of it, or maybe just because it follows a character going throughout their entire career. For my limitations, my main one was not enough diversity. This goes for both diversity within representation as well as diversity in majors. When I sent out my emails to all the different professors, only 2 of them responded out of the 4 that I sent. So I'm not sure if they actually took the survey or not. So this right there was a little bit of nursing majors were more, fortunate than other majors. Gender imbalance, there was a severe disparity between men and women. It was very highly female, and no disability representation. This was incredibly disappointing for me because that was one of the main aspects I wanted to study. However, no one referred to disabilities as a reason for career influence. For future research, I really want to see gather data from professionals already in the field. These were mostly focused around students, so I didn't get to see a lot more of actual people currently in the field. Dive deeper into what makes shows influential. This kind of came up after the Grey's Anatomy discussion, is because Grey's Anatomy was so influential, like all the nursing students said it. I wanted to see what was so important about that. And finally, compare film and television to other medias and how they influence. Does it influence more than social media? And finally, to finish up my presentation, we have 2 takeaways. My first takeaway is that film and television does have an influence on career decisions. It has been clear throughout all of my research that film and television does play a pretty significant role. And finally, I want to know what makes a show influential. As we saw, representation was very important. However, it is clear that there's been other things like long running, age, all sorts of things that I didn't necessarily get to test, and I believe that that's also very important. Thank you.
Bartlett, and this is my research partner, Patterson. Today we're going to be talking about digital distortions. We're going to be examining the impact of Spreadable Misogynoir on the identity formation of Black women.
So our project is about how this paper will explore stereotypes in popular media and how this can affect the perception of Black women. Our research gap is our study is kind of unique because this is regarding intersectionality and self-image of Black women. And our theory used symbolic interactionism, which is about how people interact with everyday items in their lives.
So for our literature review, we decided to focus on two main topics. The first one being inherent bias, which is basically understanding the historical aspects of stereotypes and how they influence how Black women interact with each other and also view themselves. And for this study, we decided to focus on the trope of the angry Black woman because we found that this was the most prominent one that we saw in our research. And then for our second one, it's social media. And social media is very big right now. Everybody's on it, more than television or film or books. So we decided that this would be our main focus today. And for our research questions, we had two. The first one is, to what extent do mediated archetypes and digital misogynoir influence the internal self-perception of Black women? And for our second question, in what ways do Black women perform communicative rescripting or altering their behavior to internally counteract these archetypes?
So our methodology, our participants, we had women 18 plus, was split between white and Black women. So 6 white women and 6 Black women. Our recruitment process was through emailing, social media, and recruitment through random polling. Our procedures were 12 interviews with the average length being about 18 minutes with data transcribed via Otter. And our data analysis, which used a thematic analysis of repetition, recurrence, and forcefulness.
And for our results, we decided that we found 3 main themes when we were looking at our responses. The first one was self-reflection. So many women found that they were looking into their own characteristics, behaviors, and they influenced the way that they acted towards others. And the next one was discrimination. We found that there were many different harmful stereotypes that caused women to look down on themselves and feel less than other races.
So for our last result, we looked at intersectionality, which is when women find an example of women who share similar characteristics to them to make them feel more seen.
And the quote that we have from our paper is, there's a commentary YouTuber that is a woman, also gay, and has autism, so they feel like very similar to them. And our research question answers, we had 2 of them, and we found significant evidence supporting our research questions. Number 1 was women who consume media are more likely to have different views of themselves, saying like social media has an impact on them. And number 2 is in response to how black women are treated on social media, they tend to try to avoid being a stereotype.
So for our discussion, we wanted to look at all 3 themes equally. So overall, we found significant evidence that media depictions of black women can change all women's perspectives of themselves. So for our first theme, intersectionality, women who saw similar depictions of themselves, not just by race, but also gender, sexuality, and physical ability, tend to be more comfortable with themselves and have more of a positive outlook on themselves. And then for our second one, discrimination, the more harmful stereotypes that were pushed onto black women, the more they tried to stay away from those stereotypes and change their behaviors, their look, and other characteristics about themselves. And then for our last one, self-reflection, the more media that was consumed, the more that women tend to look into their own behaviors to find characteristics that are either similar or different from the ones that they were seeing online.
So we have 3 limitations and 3 things for 3 future research. So our first limitation is like cultural differences. These are women from like different backgrounds who have different experiences outside of their own race. Comfortability, some of the white participants felt uneasy because 2 black women were interviewing them. And for question clarity, clarity of questions led to less accurate answers. Like sometimes we weren't as clear as we thought we were. And for future research, we could do a more Afrocentric approach, like focusing solely on black women. And further exploration of intersectionality, maybe narrowing down our specific like subcategories like black teenage mothers, black teenagers, for instance. And the oversaturation of white content on social media, how much is too much content of the same woman to the point they don't feel unique about their own experience?
And finally, for our discussion, we had 2 key takeaways for this. The first one being the depiction of black women in media have an effect on all women, not just black women. We felt as though women were more likely to feel differently about themselves the more that they saw different types of media. And then for our second takeaway, we saw that discrimination can be found in many forms. There are ways that people are discriminated against when it comes to body type, hair texture, all types of characteristics that you wouldn't even think about, but all that ties back to race. So for this study, we thought that it would be important to focus on these things, and we thank you all for watching.
Give me a point. Yeah. All right, we're back on the floor here talking to some other students here. So Julia, could you tell us a little about what you did for your research?
Yeah, so I'm doing research for Advanced Lab 2 in physics. And what we had is that we did an experiment on Coulomb's law, and we had like 3 different parts. And the purpose of it was to find Coulomb's constant by measuring the force and different things like that.
So for those of us that aren't as versed in the sciences, what is Coulomb's force?
Coulomb's force is what is here, like you can see it's like, I don't know, like we have like the force equals like K, it's like the Coulomb's constant, and we have like 2 charges. So it's like the force of attraction between 2 charges and how it gets affected by angles. So yeah, I measure different things about it.
And what did you find out about it?
That our experiment had systematic error, but it was really cool. Yeah, because we're supposed to do this thing called like an ice pail, but the ice pail was not charging properly, so we had a couple of issues. But it was really cool to see how the charges like work together and did different experiments on it.
That's very cool. All research is beneficial, whether it's successful or not. So thank you. Back to our comm presentations.
Hello, my name is Emilio Salgado Garcia.
And I'm Josie Niswander.
And welcome to our COM 460 research project, a comparative study of emotional engagement in political and non-political art. To start off, I'm going to start by explaining our main question and our theory. Our main question was if people responded more strongly to political art versus non-political art and if settings mattered. The theory that we used was the framing theory, which explains that context matters in how the messages are interpreted and how responder experiences shape the interpretation of the message. Now that I've introduced the main question and theory, Josie will explain the background research that helped shape our study.
For this research study, we had four main constructs. Our first construct was American versus foreign political art. Our second construct was street art versus museum art. Our third construct was social media usage. And our fourth and final construct was the digital versus the physical experience of art. The main idea being that context matters, not just the art piece itself. With those four constructs in mind, I'm now going to move into the specific hypotheses we tested. Our first hypothesis was that political art would create stronger emotional engagement within respondents. Our second hypothesis was that street art would create stronger engagement than museum art. And our post hoc hypothesis was that U.S. political artwork would have higher emotional engagement with respondents compared to foreign political artwork. Overall, our hypotheses were supported. Now that I've gone over what we expected to find, Emilio is going to explain how we actually tested these.
For our quantitative research, we created a 3 to 5 minute long survey using the Qualtrics platform. We recruited 116 different individuals to take our survey through social media, text, and email messages. We ended up with a list of 90 finalist answers after getting rid of abnormalities such as unfinished survey answers and illogical responses. Majority of our respondents came within the United States, followed up by Mexico, and followed up by South America, and we also had responses from countries such as Russia, Tajikistan, Saudi Arabia, and Germany. Our responder age range was from the ages of 18 to over 65 years of age. We had people from all races, genders, and political standpoints. Now, into our stimuli. For our U.S. stimuli, I used the problem we all live with as our U.S. political museum piece and sundial spectrum for U.S. non-political street art piece. For foreign stimuli, I chose the anti-Brexit mural by Banksy as our foreign political street art piece, and for our foreign non-political museum piece, I chose A Great Wave by Hokusai. Now Josie will discuss the main findings of our research.
U.S. political artwork got the strongest emotional engagement within all of our respondents. Over half of our responses showed stronger emotional engagement with U.S. political artwork. This suggests familiarity and cultural relevance matter to the pieces themselves. Street art also got stronger reactions than museum art, and over a third of our responses showed higher emotional engagement with street art pieces. Public art may feel more immediate and personal, and we suspect that the environment, compared to the more sterile, typical museum setting, plays a big part in this. Emotional response also depends on both the content of the art piece itself and the setting in which it is shown. While these findings were strong, our study also had some important limitations, and that's what I'll go over next. Our sample was limited and mostly US-based responses. Our international comparison as well could have been stronger. Our survey was short, so some of the responses lacked depth. And in the future, if we did this study again, we would like to have more international responses so that we can compare US results to foreign results better. We would like to create better survey questions as well as using more art styles and mediums. And lastly, we would like to test whether added descriptions and context of where the art is located changes the emotional engagement from our respondents. To wrap up the presentation, Emilio is now going to talk about our most surprising findings from our study. Thank you.
Our biggest takeaways was that abstract art received a higher emotional engagement than originally expected. Our second biggest takeaway was that people who identified as in the liberal political spectrum tended to have a higher emotional engagement with political artwork, both foreign and domestic. Thank you for listening. I'm Emilio Salgado Garcia.
And I'm Josie Niswander. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Rachel Houston.
And I'm Annabell Swabb.
And today we'll be talking about perceived power and physical attractiveness in criminals.
So we wanted to explore the intersection between perceived power and physical attractiveness in criminals. It focuses on how these traits influence the way offenders are viewed by the public, and especially through media and online. For our research gaps, while there is existing research on criminal perception and bias, there is a lack of attention on how people communicate and express opinions about offenders. And the theories used in our research were symbolic interactionism and the halo effect.
From our literature review, we had two themes. The first theme being attractiveness shaping guilt and punishment. This theme showed that jurors may be more forgiving and or lenient towards attractive criminals. In addition, we found a study that conducted that male criminals often receive lesser punishment. These studies show that appearance acts as a powerful shortcut in how people judge criminal behavior. Our second theme is racial and gender bias, which highlighted studies examining how preconceived ideas about race and gender influence sentencing questions. One study found that race and gender are interconnected in sentencing decisions, with both shaping the severity of punishment, while another conducted that African American offenders frequently receive harsher sentences than white individuals. From this, we gathered two research questions. Our first one being, how do preconceived biases of race or gender affect the attractiveness of criminals? And the second one, how does perceived attractiveness in criminals dictate power?
For our methodology, we gathered participants ages 18 to 25 of any race, gender, and major. The recruitment process of the participants were through Instagram posts, stories, word of mouth, and email. The procedures included 12 in-person interviews where we showed 6 pictures of contemporary criminals and asked participants about their perceptions towards them. The average length of all 12 in-person interviews were 20 minutes long, and the data was transcribed via Otter AI. And thematic analysis was used for our data, and the themes were developed using repetition, reoccurrence, and forcefulness.
So for our results, we had 3 themes. The first one being the influence of media and peer groups. Participants' perceptions of the world and the people in it are shaped through interactions with peers and exposure to online spaces, where shaped social norms and repeated messaging influence how they interpreted behavior. One participant shared, I was always told to stay away from certain areas in Richmond, and my best friend's dad was a police officer, so growing up he always told us not to talk to strangers, not to talk to people. Our second theme is attraction-based perception. Participants' responses to criminals reflected their individual perceptions of attractiveness, often revealing the specific language they use to describe offenders. Through choices of words, tone, and emphasis, that attractiveness shaped how participants framed a person's character. One participant shared, people are always going to lean towards pretty people, as far as I'm concerned, because I know I would.
For the last theme, participants expressed seriousness of crimes based on intent and planning. One participant stated, if it's a crime of passion, a crime of love, I can find some sort of empathy. Overall, we found that attractiveness can influence perceptions of power in certain situations, with the 2 research questions we had.
So for our discussion, we have 3 themes. Caucasian male offenders are generally seen as more attractive and forgivable. For example, participants displayed more forgiveness towards Luigi Mangione, using subjective language to soften his crime. Our second is early influences like family, friends, and environment may shape how people judge danger, trust, and attractiveness. Participants often cited their family and friends influencing their outlook on danger and trustworthiness. And our third is that perceived attractiveness can create power through cult-like followings online, such as on spaces like TikTok and Reddit, or affect public opinion on crime. But sometimes they have no effect in the public outlook on criminals. So we had a few limitations. Our first one was our sample size, since 12 people do not reflect the country's outlook on this topic. Our second being we had a lack of diversity. We only interviewed 2 males and 2 people of color, and we had a really small range of backgrounds, and that could affect our responses. And our third is that our photo composition was inconsistent. Participants consistently cited that photos were very odd or weird, and so that definitely affected our research.
For our future research, we suggest increasing variability by including offenders who have committed different types of crimes. We also recommend focusing on timeliness, meaning looking at more recent cases to see how current events influence perceptions. Lastly, future studies should include more diversity, such as offenders of different races and genders. So we have two takeaways. The first takeaway being attractiveness does not excuse crimes. Even though someone's looks can affect how people see them, it doesn't lessen the severity of their actions. This shows that appearance and action should be judged separately.
Our second takeaway is that it's difficult to pinpoint the influence of race and gender in perception of criminals, because there was a distinct lack of participations bringing the subject up, with only one participant explicitly mentioning race and gender. Although there is language to support this idea, there's no direct comments affiliated with it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, we're back on the floor here with Aaron Lewis. Aaron, tell us a little bit about what you did for Research Day.
So what we did was we rolled a set of dice for 3 experiments, each experiment having a different set of dice, and we rolled them a different number of times. For our experiments, we found that as you increase the number of rolls, the entropy of the dice also increases, as well as the multiplicity and the probability of it occurring, or the probability of a certain macro state within the dice occurring. We also found that if you treat the dice that you rolled as heat being transferred, as well as the macro state as temperature for it, that you can find that relates to the second law of thermodynamics, and that ensures that as the entropy of our ensembles increase, the entropy also increases.
Very, very interesting. Unfortunately, a little above my head here, but that's awesome research, Aaron. Congratulations. Back on to the comm presentations.
Hi everyone, I'm Amory.
And I'm Adrian.
And today we're going to be talking about our research on political ideology and attitudes towards cancel culture. Basically, we wanted to understand whether your political beliefs, like being a liberal, conservative, or independent, actually influence how you feel about cancel culture and whether or not you participate in it.
This topic is relevant because cancel culture has become such a big part of social media and everyday life. We constantly see people being called out or canceled, but there's still a huge disagreement about whether it's accountability or just going too far.
To help guide our study, we use 2 main theories. The first is significance quest theory, which basically means people are motivated to feel important or valued, so they may take actions to gain a sense of meaning or recognition.
We also use congruence theory, which is the idea that people are more likely to support others who share similar beliefs and distance themselves from people who don't.
Previous research shows that political ideology usually plays a role in how people view cancel culture. Conservatives are more likely to see it as limiting freedom of speech, whereas liberals are more likely to see it as holding one accountable.
So when someone does something that goes against your values, you're more likely to judge or reject them.
Research shows that this emotional response can drive people to engage in cancel culture, especially online.
We also looked at moral outrage, which is the emotional reaction people have when they feel like someone has done something wrong.
So based on that, we created two main hypotheses. First, we predicted that conservatives would be less supportive of cancel culture than liberals or independents.
Second, we predicted that people who spend more time on social media would be more likely to participate in cancel culture.
We also explored a post hoc idea that liberals might support cancel culture less, in some cases due to fear of professional or reputational damage.
To test this, we conducted a survey using Qualtrics with 16 questions and included Likert scale, multiple choice, and open-ended questions, so we got both numerical data and explanations.
We distributed this through Instagram, Facebook, and Canvas and measured political ideology, support for cancel culture, and social media usage. We ended up with 120 participants after removing incomplete responses. About 73% were female and 92% identified as Caucasian.
In terms of political ideology, 57% were slightly to very conservative, 27% were slightly to very liberal, and 17% were independent. Now getting into results. One of the biggest things we saw was the role of moral outrage. People definitely had an emotional reaction to situations involving cancel culture.
But when we looked into the actual data, most people weren't participating. In fact, about 80% of participants said they had not participated in cancel culture at all within the past year.
18% said they actively participated, like posting on social media or boycotting, and 2% said it depended on the situation.
So even though people feel strongly, they're mostly just observing rather than taking action. And this connects back to moral outrage. The emotion is there, but it doesn't always turn into behavior. Now, looking at political ideology, we originally thought it would have a strong effect on attitudes towards cancel culture.
But our results showed that it didn't. When we ran our statistical test, we got a p-value of 0.436, which means the result was not statistically significant.
So basically, there was no meaningful difference between conservatives, liberals, and independents and how they viewed cancel culture.
We also looked at social media use, and again, the results were not significant. The p-value was 0.248, which is still above 0.05, so spending more time on social media didn't actually mean people were more likely to participate.
However, we did find one significant result in our post hoc analysis with a chi-square value of 12.4 and a p-value of 0.014.
Since that's still below 0.05, it means there is a significant relationship there, which suggests that things like fear of reputational or professional damage might play a bigger role than political identity. There were a few limitations to our study. Our sample wasn't very diverse. Most participants were white females between the ages of 18 and 24.
We also had some wording issues, like using Republican and conservative interchangeably.
And since it was self-reported, some participants may not have answered fully honestly.
For future research, we think it would be helpful to include more diverse populations.
And also focus on specific cancel culture situations. People may respond differently depending on the context.
So overall, one of our biggest takeaways is that cancel culture is not as politically divided as we expected.
And most people aren't participating, they're just observing.
And emotional reactions like moral outrage seem to matter more than political party. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm McKayla Pisa, and today I'll be presenting my research topic on code switching and the interpersonal communication. Code switching is when a person tends to change their mannerisms, tones, or just the way they act depending upon their situation and depending upon their environment. What our research gap was provided was the ability to study how and why people change the way they interact in a general manner. For our theory we used communication accommodation theory. Now, moving on to our literature review, we have found 3 common themes, which were digital and social media, talking differently, and then code switching for formal or professional reasons. For digital and social media use, digital communication was relevant because people switch the way they talk over social media platforms and their mediums. For talking differently, people talk differently because the way their tone changes depending upon the recipient and the relationship with that person. For professional and formal code switching, people's manners tend to change depending on if they are in an informal or formal environment. Now, presenting our research questions, the first one being, what is the connection between code switching and using digital media? And then the second research question is being, which modes of communication do people perform while code switching? Moving on to our methodology, our demographics were males and females. Our ages were 18 and up, and we had a majority of college students. Our recruitment process included email, text, and in-person. And for our procedures, we conducted 12 interviews, and the average length was about 14 to 15 minutes, and we had a lot of our data transcribed through Otter AI. For our data analysis, we had the adjustment of communication via the medium, and then our themes were developed using repetition and recurrence. Moving on to our results, for digital and social media, we had the 3 common themes, and our first being digital and social media, is that people use technology as a buffer from interpersonal communication in order to keep their identity as private as they want or as public as they want. And for an example, we had an interviewee state, online, I find myself being more careful about what I say and how I say it because it will be online forever. I like to keep my digital footprint as clean as possible. Now, for talking differently is altering your tone and your body language in order to match an audience. And for example, we had an interviewee state, I speak quicker and with a more natural accent compared to a classroom where I over-enunciate my words and force the accent to go away to make sure I'm understood more clearly. Moving on to formal and professional code switching, people tend to use strategic dialect for the benefit of their professional gains in order to A, secure a job, or B, just have themselves in a more put-together manner when they are in a formal setting. And for example, we had another interviewee state, if I stopped code switching entirely, I think I would be unemployed. Now, moving on to our research question answers, digital media acts as a buffer that is used to filter language and protects one's reputations. And then people use professional speech to strategically benefit professional gains and use improper speech to gain closer informal connections. So basically, it means if you talk in a nice manner, you're in a formal way and you're trying to gain a formal or professional benefit. And then if you're talking informally, you're trying to have an informal connection, say with a friend or as if it was your best friend. Moving on to our discussion, based on our findings, people code switch for the 3 general reasons. People use digital and social media as a buffer to protect themselves from the true interactions which could damage their identity. The second reason being that people talk differently in order to mirror the tone and the body language of others in order to benefit or protect their own self-interests. The last reason being, people use more proper language to identify as the most professional version of themselves around authoritative figures in order to secure what they need for a job or secure what position and how they want to be perceived as. Moving on to our limitations and future research. For our limitations, most of the research is focused on bilingual and multilingual code switching. Secondly, we had a very small sample size, only of 12 people. And then also our age group was very concentrated, very limited into who we could include in our interviews. Moving on to future research, we would like to gather more data from a more diverse population. Secondly, we would like to use a larger population in order to gather more specific data, and then collecting data from a wider age range, such as minors and kids that are under 18, in order to get the younger generation's input on it to see how it's affecting the overall general population. For our discussion, we have two takeaways. For the first takeaway being, code switching is not only limited to bilingual and multilingual speakers, but to all general persons. And the last takeaway is, code switching happens naturally in both digital and interpersonal communication mediums. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Chavez-Alonso, and today I will be presenting my research on the relationship between fear of missing out, or FOMO, social media use, and perceived social connection among college-age students. FOMO is defined as the anxiety that others are having rewarding experiences without you. This topic has been especially relevant after COVID-19, as many people began relying more heavily on social media to stay connected. This study focuses on college-age students because they are the most active groups on social media. I use social comparison theory, which explains how people evaluate themselves by comparing their lives to others, especially in online environments. For my lit review, focuses on 4 key concepts. First, FOMO, which is linked to anxiety and constant checking of social media. Second, social media use, which increases exposure to others' lives, often highlighting their best moments. Third, social comparison, which individuals compare themselves to others, which can negatively affect self-esteem. And finally, perceived social connection, which refers to how connected someone feels to others. Together, these concepts suggest that while social media is designed to connect people, it may also contribute to feelings of missing out and disconnection. For my hypothesis, I tested 3 in my study. First, that the higher social media use would be associated with higher levels of FOMO. Second, that higher levels of FOMO would be associated with lower perceived social connection. And third, social media use would indirectly affect social connection through FOMO. However, these were not significant, meaning the data did not strongly support these predicted relationships. For my methodology, to test these, I conducted an online survey. The survey included 12 questions measuring social media use, FOMO levels, and perceived social connection. It was conducted between March 6th and ended on March 19th. This method allowed me to collect data among college-age students. My participants, the final number was 35 college-age students between the ages of 18 to 25. Majority of them were in their early 20s and mid into 25. The majority of participants were female and most identified as white, with a smaller number from other racial backgrounds. Participants were recruited through social media, group chats, and Canvas messaging. For my discussion, even though the results were not significant, there were still important patterns in the data. Many students reported feeling left out when viewing social media posts, which shows that FOMO is still a common experience. Additionally, several participants reported feeling disconnected, even though they were frequently using social media. For example, one participant shared that they feel like everyone else is doing something fun when they scroll online. This suggests that social media use does not necessarily create meaningful social connection. It may actually highlight feelings of exclusion. For my limitations in research, there are several limitations to consider. First, the sample size made it difficult to find significant results. Second, the lack of diversity limits how broadly these findings can be applied. And third, the use of self-reported data means responses may not be completely accurate. For future research, if I were to do this again, I would recommend using a large and more diverse sample, comparing different platforms like TikTok and Instagram, and exploring the long-term mental health effects of FOMO. For my takeaways, I did 2. The first one is that social media may increase FOMO among college-age students. And second, FOMO does not improve the feelings of connection. It may actually increase feelings of disconnection. Overall, this research shows that while social media is designed to connect us, it may sometimes have the opposite effect. Thank you.
Back down here on the floor, we have a little bit of a break. We're about midway through our comm presentation, so we're going to talk to some other students. But right here, we have Sage Bishop joining us, who is in a comm class, so obviously making the right choices there. But Sage, if you want to introduce your research and a little bit of who you worked on it with.
Right. So, as you know, my name is Sage. I worked with Zoe and April on this for English 319, technical writing. The half of the semester we have been working on this for Research Day. It is a prototype that we then made the final version of, and we've been working on a recommendation report for said final product. This is a Lego build called Little Buddy. I really hope students have fun building this and just sort of testing out our instruction manual.
What kind of are some of your takeaways, your recommendations?
for what exactly? Like,
You made a recommendation report, so what did you kind of like, what were your conclusions of that?
so with the recommendation report, it was what did we need to change about this prototype to make it into the final version, taking into consideration some of the instructions that might have been a little bit confusing during our first prototype, and revising and editing.
That is awesome, Ian. I love Research Day because look at already the different variety of disciplines and different actions we've seen here. So we're going to take a break and come back to the floor with another research project in just a second. All right, returning to the floor with Ryan Urban here, and Ryan built a gigantic structure here. We'll try to give you a sense of all that, but Ryan, tell us a little about what you did and what you all built.
Yeah, so this is for the engineering capstone course for physics, and what we did is built a 6-meter radio telescope. It's a little bit different from an optical telescope because it uses different frequencies. So optical telescopes were used to optical light in the visible frequency, right, your RGB. But in radio telescopes, we can use infrared light, we can use UV lights, we can use FM, AM light, or frequencies. And so we kind of took an idea that we saw off of online in a forum post for radio or amateur radio astronomers, and we took that and doubled it. So they were using a 3-meter, we're using a 20-meter, which is they used a 3-meter, we're using a 6-meter, which is 20 feet. And so we started designing this at the end of last semester, and we just got it in our second prototype around 3 weeks ago. So this is kind of the display model. This is kind of a Frankenstein version of prototype 1 and 2, but it's supposed to be light enough to where someone in their backyard can actually build it themselves. We might have a different version that's 3 meters, because I'm assuming the people who were in their backyards didn't have 5 people to make this thing. So we're going to do that instead. We're going to hopefully have something like that as well. But yeah, that's basically the whole rundown on it.
That is awesome. This is a huge project like this, and you mentioned you've taken multiple semesters. What are some of your personal learning takeaways from working on this project?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of design work for other research projects. I went up to CERN and I did in Switzerland, and I designed this housing thing for a sensor and stuff like that, but I had a 3D printer do that for me. I think the biggest learning or the biggest lesson I've learned from something like this is actually manufacturing is a different skill entirely. I was able to, me and the 2 others I was working with, Madison Lavelle and Sean Oliva, we designed the project in Onshape, which is a 3D modeling software, which was decently painless, except trying to get this parabolic shape, but that just took us like an hour to figure out how to do that in the software. Actually cutting it is a different monster entirely, and we needed Evan from the Seed Hub to actually help us with that, but even that, we kind of make mistakes when we do that, so this cross-section right here needs to be at a very specific angle. We calculated what that angle is. We had a method of calculating that angle, but when we cut it, some of them actually didn't work because the blade has a length, right? We have to consider that into the factor and stuff like that. Also, using the CNC mill down there, you can also make mistakes, right? I'm not gonna dog on Evan too much, but when we were cutting them, right, we have a design path, and if you cut on the line, it's a lot different if you cut in the lines. So if you look down here, right here we have like a little bit of space right here. That is because the tool cut on the line instead of in the line. So we have extra space. Luckily this is just for display, so this doesn't matter that much. Our real version actually has, we cut in between the lines for like the model path, so it actually like fits these keyhole slots, but you can see like that's definitely a big learning lesson. Always remember like your blade has a length and that cutting is a big monster compared to designing it, so.
That is awesome, and I know that as an amateur hobbyist as well here too. So thank you very much, Ryan. We'll be back with one more person from the floor. Longtime viewers of the stream may recognize this face right here. Javier Roldan was with us last year, but you have new research this year, Javier. Tell us what you did in the last year.
Well, so last year I was actually looking at Chagas disease, and mainly that poster was all about pretty much recognizing Chagas disease as a pretty dangerous disease, which is endemic to the United States. But as you know, it is the most underdeveloped, undiagnosed disease in the United States. Now, Chagas disease kills about 10 to 20,000 people each year, and it is pretty much the second most dangerous insect, only second to mosquitoes, because of this parasite. And so this year, this is my senior thesis, I will be collecting these insects, the triatomines, more notably a certain species known as Triatomus sanguisuga, and basically we're trying to figure out if this insect is very prevalent in Virginia, and if it is, we're basically screening for the parasite itself using PCR, because we're not sure if all these triatomine insects in Virginia have Chagas disease, but if they do, that could be a concerning thing because it's not screened for at all in the United States. And while these insects may not be very prevalent in spreading the disease, it spreads through other means, as the parasite is very good at hiding itself. And so it spreads through blood transfusions, organ transplants, and we know that, of course, pregnant mothers can spread it to their children as well. But the fact that it can spread through blood transfusions is very dangerous because if it's not screened for, you could be potentially infecting hundreds or even thousands of people. And we know that at least 10 to 20 million people are infected with this parasite. And the acute stages are pretty much, you are asymptomatic, but 10 to 15 years down the line, once the chronic stages develop, your heart can bloat to enormous sizes, and this causes lots of respiratory and cardiac problems, which kill, of course, the 10 to 20,000 people every year. So it's very important to at least have knowledge that this insect exists in Virginia and the United States as a whole, but also that this parasite is spread by them, and we're not sure how many people are infected in the United States yet. We know in Virginia there has been at least 5 cases, and just 5 cases can be scary because we don't know about these people. We don't know if they've gotten blood tests done, organ transplants, or anything. So, of course, my research will be looking more past that step, seeing what things affect the parasite in the gut of the trypanosomes.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Javier. It's good to see you again. Sadly, I think you're graduating, so you won't be back next year. But now, back to more comm research presentations.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan.
And my name is Rosalie, and today we are presenting our research on the influence of media, film, and television on constructs of girlhood and feminine identity.
Our study is the influence of media, film, and television on the construction of girlhood and the feminine identity. Our research gap is a lack of research on how media, film, and television help women construct ideas about their identity. And then the theory that we use is symbolic interactionism, which helps women explain and use symbols to express their feminine identity. In our literature review, we found different themes that helped us form our research question. The first theme was feminist trends in online and corporate landscapes. This is feminist ideas on how online and corporate institutions help us frame experiences. So like power shifts in different corporate institutions. And then the second theme that we found was femininity and girlhood in sexualized and stereotyped media. This is the sexualized and stereotyped media that constructs our self-image.
The third theme that we found was media influence on body image and gendered norms. This includes different types of media that helps us construct our gender and body image, such as the Barbie movie. These themes assisted us in prompting our research question: how do media, film, and television shape women's ideas of femininity, girlhood, and in what ways do these portrayals affect body image and self-esteem among women?
Our participants were 18 to 22 years old, identified as female, and had previous media experience. To recruit our participants, we used social media, text messages, and word of mouth.
We conducted a total of 12 interviews, averaging at about 10 minutes in length, and we transcribed all of our data using Otter AI.
To analyze our data, we used thematic analysis, and we developed themes using repetition, reoccurrence, and forcefulness. After analyzing our data, we found 4 different themes across our interviews. The first theme is the feminine connection. This is a supportive community and sisterhood women find amongst each other in general and in more personal settings. One of our participants said that this was supporting each other, wanting to be in the same community without pushing each other down. The second thing we found was wellness and body image. This is the overall well-being through understanding physical, mental, and physical emotional health, and how women perceive their body, further understanding body image. One of our participants said, "I think I'm doing a freaking trend or lifestyle change monthly, and I'm falling to it."
The next theme that we found was representation in social media, film, and television. This includes all representations of women that are represented in the media. This further influences stereotypes and societal norms that are pushed onto women. One of our participants said, "Think of like an archetype, like Sabrina Carpenter, the dainty, like seductive, type of woman, and men are falling." The next theme that we found was personal experiences. These are lived experiences that participants restated to further develop their rationale as to why they answered our questions in the way that they did. And one of our interviewees stated, "I've always just been a girly girl, so it's like a part of me, I guess. I've always loved doing my nails, my hair from a young age."
These themes helped us answer our research question. Media, film, and television affect how women perceive ideas of girlhood through dramatized portrayals and sexist characterizations. It helps women understand their feminine identity through showing common lived experiences, and it negatively affects women's self-esteem through creating the ideal body.
Our research is important because media, including social media, film, and television, shapes how we perceive gender identity and others' lived experiences. It also influences how women see themselves and their role in society, as well as promoting unrealistic body goals. These representations can shape how women view our own bodies.
Some of the limitations we found were that we did not ask many follow-up questions or expand on any of the questions to get clarification. Our recruitment sample was smaller, meaning we only interviewed a certain amount of people, and we did not show any images which could have evoked better responses.
As for future research, we would like to interview a wider range of sexualities and identity representations since we did have a smaller pool. Next, we would also like to dive deeper into the Barbie movie and why it had such an effect on women's self-construct. And lastly, we would like to gain more insight on the male perspective on girlhood and feminine identity because, again, we did only interview those who identify as female.
Our first takeaway is that girlhood is shaped through not only lived experiences, but through media representation of the feminine experience.
And lastly, harmful media representations can cause negative constructions on how women and girls see ourselves.
Thank you.
My name is Brittany Houts.
And I'm Nina Lavoie.
Change this. So for our study examines how Instagram influences identity formation among college-age students. We're specifically looking at Instagram and its visual and feedback-driven mechanisms such as likes, comments, follows, reposts, all of the above, and how this curation impacts their sense of self. So for our research gap, as most research focuses on social media as a whole, we're focusing on Instagram itself and how the feedback mechanisms shape one's sense of self. And for impression management theory, for our theory, we used impression management theory by Goffman. And this theory explains how individuals strategically present themselves to control how others perceive them.
For our literature review, we looked at 4 different constructs. The first one we looked at was identity clarity, which is when an individual has a clear, stable sense of self. And this is important because it influences decision-making and relationships. We also looked at social comparison, which is comparing yourself to another person on Instagram, like their lifestyle or maybe their appearance. We also looked at self-presentation, which is how others curate themselves online and their image, how they want to look. And the last one we looked at was audience feedback. This is likes, comments that shape how people present themselves. For our hypothesis, we predicted that more Instagram use would increase self-presentation, and this was supported. For our second hypothesis, we predicted that social comparison would lower identity clarity, and this was not supported. And for our last final hypothesis, we predicted that weaker identity would relate to lower confidence, and this was supported.
So for our procedures, it was a survey-based study with 15 questions. It took about 3 to 5 minutes. We distributed it via Canvas, LinkedIn, Instagram, Yik Yak, and QR codes within our classrooms. And some of the sample questions were about Instagram usage, comparisons, and audience feedback. So for our total number of participants, it was 98 participants, ages 18 to 25 years old, and these were college students who had an active Instagram account. And for our demographics, 84% were female, while 14% were male, and our largest age range was 21 to 22 years old with 46%, and about 77% of participants said that they rarely to sometimes posted on Instagram. So for our discussion, for identity clarity, within our study, identity clarity was not significantly impacted by social comparison on Instagram. The findings that supported this were hypothesis 2 that said that the 2 variables did not have a relationship at all. And the evidence was that participants expressed that they had a strong sense of self independent from their social media influences, and statements such as, "I know who I am regardless of Instagram."
In contrast to identity clarity, the study found a strong relationship between Instagram and concern for self-presentation, and our hypothesis 1 was supported. So those who were more active on Instagram cared more about how they presented themselves, and higher levels of Instagram use had more attention to image and audience feedback.
So for limitations in future research, our sample was mostly female, as well as it was self-reported data, so there could be bias or a lack of reporting, as well as we only sampled college-age students.
For future research, we suggest that they use different types of social media, such as TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube, to see different behaviors and see how that affects identity. We also think they should look at factors that moderate relationships such as self-esteem, personality traits, or gender, and see how that affects experiences. And lastly, we suggest that they look at this for a longer period of time. Since identity development is such a long-term process, it would be really interesting to see it in adulthood years. For our first key takeaway, we found Instagram use related to how students manage their image, but not strongly to their sense of identity. So those who used Instagram more cared more about their self-presentation, but social comparison didn't really factor or relate to identity clarity.
So for our second takeaway, it was that a strong personal identity matters more than social media behaviors, which reinforces the identity development theory, stating that individuals have a strong sense of values, goals, and self.
Thank you. Oh.
Hi, my name is Emma Horn.
And I'm Kennedy Olson.
And our research is titled Parasocial Relationships on Social Media and How Influencer Communication Creates Perceived Connection. Now Kennedy is going to go into our introduction.
This study focuses on parasocial relationships between social media users and influencers. These relationships are one-sided, where followers develop a sense of connection with influencers who are unaware of their individual audience members. Our research addresses a gap by using one-on-one interviews rather than surveys, allowing for more in-depth responses and real-life perspectives. We also applied symbolic interactionism, which explains how individuals create meaning through interactions, including ones that occur in digital spaces. Emma will now discuss the literature that informed our study.
Existing research shows that social media contributes to parasocial relationships feeling more mutual and personal, despite remaining one-sided. Relatability, authenticity, and emotional investment are key factors that influence these connections and can impact followers' trust and behaviors. Research on virtual influencers suggests that emotional connections are influenced more by perceived authenticity than by whether the influence is real. Based on these findings, our research questions focused on what drives strong emotional connections and which communication behaviors create a sense of closeness or identification. I will now pass it to Kennedy to go over our methodology.
Our participants were individuals between the ages of 18 and 25 who are frequent users of social media and follow at least one influencer. Participants were recruited through word of mouth, and we conducted 12 interviews with an average length of 8 minutes. All data was transcribed and analyzed using thematic analysis, and these themes were identified based on repetition, recurrence, forcefulness within participant responses. I will now present our results. Our first key finding is that relatability and perception play a significant role in driving parasocial connections. Connections develop when followers relate to influencers through shared experiences and perceive them as open and authentic, which strengthens emotional bonds. For example, one participant described the experience by saying, "It feels like a FaceTime call with a friend almost." We also found that emotional investment is selective and situational. Participants reported stronger emotional responses during specific events rather than constant attachment. For instance, one participant stated, "When they break up, it's sad. Why do I feel sad about somebody I don't even know?" Emma will now discuss our additional findings.
Another finding is that engagement patterns and influencer content shapes audience interaction. Participants consistently engage with content through both active and passive behaviors, gaining motivation and ideas, but not allowing it to strongly influence their personal opinions. For example, one participant shared, "I don't let what people say online influence my personal opinion." Another participant explained, "I'm just liking stuff to build my algorithm." Additionally, awareness and curated content limits parasocial connection. Participants recognize that influencers present only some selected aspects of their lives. For example, one participant noted, "We're only seeing 1 minute of their whole entire day, not their actual whole entire day." Another stated, "People are only posting what they want you to see." Our research indicates that strong emotional connections form through relatability, authenticity, and shared experiences. These elements make influencers feel familiar and personally meaningful to followers. Influencers also create a sense of closeness through self-disclosure, consistent posting, and interactive communication styles such as storytelling, responding, and casual content. I will now pass it back to Kennedy for the discussion.
Our key points reinforce that relatability, authenticity, and shared experiences are central to parasocial connections. Emotional investment is situational and increases during significant events in an influencer's life. Engagement is consistent but remains primarily motivational rather than strongly influential on decision-making. Lastly, awareness of curated content limits the strength and depth of these connections. Emma will now present limitations and future research.
There are several limitations to our study. First being the sample size was limited to 12 college-age students. The study focused only on frequent social media users. Additionally, the participants were only female. For future research, it would be beneficial to include a more diverse age group and population. Further studies could also explore the long-term effects of parasocial connection.
For our overall takeaways, overall, parasocial relationships are perceived as real and meaningful. However, they remain selective, temporary, and shaped by individual interpretation of influencer content. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we got to take you behind the scenes of the behind the scenes here. So let's peek at the comm green room. And now let's go see if we can find some students who are getting ready for their presentation here. So follow me, folks. Let's go see. Oh, I think we've spotted somebody. I think we've spotted 2 comm students in the wild here. Kenji and Noah, you are live right now.
Hello.
How are you feeling about your presentation?
I'm feeling great. I'm ready to rock and roll.
We're hanging in there. We're ready to go.
All right, you heard that here, folks. Stay tuned. They'll be on shortly.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tyler Badgett, a student in communication quantitative research, and I'm here to talk about my research study, political awareness and stress levels among college students. So as we all know, the political environment right now is perhaps more divided than it's ever been. Last night, a referendum to redraw the state's congressional maps passed by, I believe, fewer than 2%. And division continues to be reported as higher on political studies. And throughout history, political division tends to represent itself more on college campuses. We can think about the encampments for Palestine back in 2024, think about the Kent State protests back during Vietnam, and then across the world, student protests have made big changes within countries. However, especially in the age of social media, the impact that this heightened political division tends to have on college students is relatively understudied. The reason for today's research. The theoretical founding for this research is going to be the transactional model of stress and coping by Lazarus and Folkman, which argues basically that basically the way you tend to perceive stress is not based on the actual threat level, but instead your ability to cope with it. So this research is primarily focused on 4 constructs. Political awareness levels, basically how often somebody tends to check political news. The outlook on the political environment, basically how somebody feels about the way the country is going, whether that be approval of their leaders, whether that be their preparedness to participate in democracy. Stress levels, which is the big one, basically how often does somebody experience symptoms of anxiety and depression, measured by the scales used to diagnose anxiety and depression. And then whether someone is a member of a marginalized group, which is defined here as someone who identifies as a non-white or a member of the LGBTQ+ community. So there were 3 hypotheses for this study. The first one being that students who are more attuned to current events tend to have higher levels of general anxiety and depression. This was found not significant. Students who identify as a member of a historically marginalized group tend to have worse outlooks on the political environment, also found not significant. And that students closer to graduation are more likely to be concerned about the economy. While this was found not significant, there was clearly a trend there. So the methodology for this was a 3 to 5 minute survey that recruited respondents via social media or word of mouth, most commonly through social media like Yik Yak and Reddit. Participants, there were 78 of them after data cleanup. Basically, the reason people were removed from the data sample was on unanswered questions, and the primary focus was college students. As far as demographics go, 62% of respondents were women compared to 28% that were men. 67% of people who filled out the survey were white compared to 10% who identified as another race. Sexual orientation, only 44% of respondents identified as heterosexual compared to 28% that identified as bisexual and 7% as gay or lesbian. And then perhaps most interestingly, 2024 vote. 55% of respondents voted for Kamala Harris in 2024 compared to 7% who voted for President Trump, and 22% who did not vote, either because they were not eligible or because they just did not cast a ballot, which is actually one of the limitations for this study, but we'll get into that in a second. So, as far as discussion goes, political awareness did not have an impact on personal stress levels, thus leaving hypothesis 1 left insignificant. However, it's still quite interesting. College students tend to check their political news once a day, which is perhaps more than common media or more than people of older generations tend to give them credit for. Furthermore, stress levels. The hypothesis that incorporated stress levels was found not significant. However, what it did find is that college students tend to report symptoms of anxiety and depression more than half of the days in a 2-week period, which is quite higher than the average population that's been found in other surveys. However, it does track with previous research done on college students, and that leads into one of the limitations, which is that the scales for anxiety and depression that I used as part of this research did not properly allow for ideal reporting. Basically, people reported symptoms of anxiety and depression off the chart, meaning that nothing was found significant. There was a low response rate off of Trump 2024 voters, meaning there was not room for proper partisan analysis. And there was also an overwhelmingly white and female sample. Obviously, I think that tends to be a theme in a lot of the research presentations today. Simply because of Longwood's environment, we tend to be a predominantly white and predominantly female school. In terms of future research, this goes off of our limitations. How stress levels differ when a person's preferred political party is in power. For example, do Republicans tend to report more stress when someone like President Biden is in office compared to Democrats reporting more stress when someone like President Trump is in office? That's definitely a ground for future research. How stress levels differ on politically active campuses versus not politically active campuses. At Longwood tends to be a not very politically active campus compared to somewhere like VCU. And then how method of news consumption impacts your stress level. So if you look at social media more, do you report higher stress levels because of things like sensationalization, television news, the 24-hour cycle? All of this is very interesting grounds for future research. And there are 2 primary takeaways for this study. College students tend to be far more stressed than other demographics, not just politically. And so it became difficult to separate political and personal stress levels when college students tend to report stress levels that are completely off the charts. And then the second takeaway is that college students are not monolithic in top political issue or political outlook. If you remember hypothesis 3 for this study, it predicted that students who are closer to graduation tend to worry more about the economy. It was actually incredibly interesting to look at the diverse political opinions that people tend to report caring about. They include student debt. They include people reported being worried about civil rights and rights for the queer community and non-white communities. It was not monolithic whatsoever. And I think it's important to remember that just because people are a member of a certain age group does not necessarily predict what they're necessarily most concerned about. College students are not a monolith. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoy the rest of Research Day.
Hey everyone, I'm Kenji Carrillo.
And I'm Noah Stohlman.
And today we're presenting our project, Who You Follow Matters, exploring tail culture and communication in sports betting. Our study looks at how college-age males communicate sports betting and how these conversations shape betting behavior. We found a gap in research because a lot of studies focused on the gambling behavior or the harms of gambling, but not so much on the communication that makes betting feel normalized. We wanted to focus on peer influence, social interactions, and social media. We use symbolic interactionism because it helps explain how meaning is created through social interaction.
In our literature review, we found five ideas to help frame or support our study. The first being sports betting is becoming more normalized. The second, your peers do play a role. The third, betting is skill-based. And the fourth, digital media is making sports betting more easy. And fifth, losses are seen as socially acceptable amongst our population. Now, our research question asks how college-age males communicate about sports betting amongst their peers, and how communication shapes belonging, credibility, and betting decisions. Now, moving on to our methodology, we interviewed male college students between the ages of 18 and 22, and we recruited via email, word of mouth, and social media direct message. And we used thematic analysis to find patterns amongst our population. Now, our themes, they were developed through repetition, recurrence, and forcefulness.
Theme 1. Our first theme was that sports betting is normalized in everyday life. Participants described it as casual and sometimes even common. Our second theme was peer influence. Group chats and social circles played a big role in how participants made their betting decisions and decisions on what bets to place. Our third theme is that betting was seen as skill-based. Participants talked about research, matchups, and strategy, along with looking at statistics and analytics instead of relying purely based on luck. Our fourth theme was that digital media and technology strengthening betting habits. Apps, social media, and even AI were made betting easier and more constant. Our fifth theme is that financial losses are often accepted as part of betting, even when those losses seem significant. Overall, we found that sports betting communication in peer and digital spaces shapes trust, decision-making, and social belonging.
Now, in our discussion, we found that sports betting was deeply woven into college male culture. Peer relationships, they also helped introduce our population to sports betting. And participants, the main part is they see sports betting as a skill-based game. With digital platforms, they are making it easier to sports bet, and when money was lost, like I said, it's still seen as socially acceptable.
Limitations. Some of our limitations were our study had a smaller sample size. We were limited to the university being a small sample size and also limited financial diversity. And we focused solely on college students. Future research could look at AI and how it influenced betting confidence, compare betting habits across genders, and explore long-term financial and emotional effects of sports betting.
Now moving on to our takeaways. One of our biggest takeaways was that sports betting functioned more than just gambling. It shaped trust, connection, and decision-making amongst our population.
Our second takeaway is that many participants frame sports betting as something to do with research and skill rather than relying based solely on chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Colbreth.
And I'm Julia Glasser, and this is our research project on music and emotion.
We decided to research this topic because we wanted to gain a better understanding of how music plays a role in human moods, but also to justify why people listen to certain music when they're experiencing a specific emotion. And a theory that we used throughout our research was symbolic interactionism. And for those who aren't familiar with this theory, it's defined as facts based on and directed by symbols. And the foundation of this theory is meaning.
Throughout the paper, we found three main themes: expression and emotion, emotional regulation, personal identity, and music. So expression and emotion, music functions as a form of emotion. Emotional regulation, music has therapeutic aspects to it. Think about that time when you would go to those Mommy and Me classes and the music would calm you down as a child. Personal identity music being the last theme, it is all about yourself and your self-expression to others. Music is a way to show who you are to the people around you, as a way for the people around you to show who they are to you. I always say you can learn a lot about someone by listening to the music they listen to. And we also found two research questions. The first one is, why do individuals choose certain types of music based on their emotional state? And the second research question is, how do individuals express their personal identity through music?
Now on to our methodology. Our participants consisted of being 18 to 25-year-old college students, and our recruitment procedures consisted of email and word of mouth. In all, we had 12 interviews with an average length of each interview being 6 minutes, and we transcribed our data using Otter AI and TurboScribe. For our data analysis, we used thematic analysis, and we developed themes using repetition, recurrence, and forcefulness.
We found three results, the first result being personal or emotional connection to music. And this is all about reminders of your childhood. One of our participants unfortunately lost their grandparent, and they said after the funeral, they all gathered together to listen to grandpa music. It brought them together as a family, and she just said it reminded us of him, as well as early music exposure. Basically, when people started listening to music, why, how, and when. An average amount of people said they started listening to music in middle school. That's when people normally get an iPhone or an iPod and they get a Spotify account, and that's when they started listening to music.
And for our last theme, it was everyday listening habits. And this is when participants tended to listen to music the most. And an example that we found through one of our interviews is that the participant said, "I always have my headphones in," which indicates that they listen to music very frequently. Ultimately, these three themes answered our research question because we found that people choose music and it affects their emotion no matter if they choose it on purpose or not.
Within our discussion, we talked about two main things like Caroline has mentioned. Music is impactful on college-age students, and music is a part of everyday life. You can't go around that. You constantly have your headphones in, as well as college, when you're at the dining hall, you're listening to music. Before classes, a lot of your professors will play music, especially before and after. And when you're at the gym, you're constantly listening to music. College is a very special time for people to get to know you, as well as you show who you are by listening to your music.
Through our research, we found three limitations, with the first one being gender imbalance. We had all female participants, which limited our ability to gain more research and knowledge from male participants. Our second limitation consisted of we didn't ask about Spotify Wrapped or Apple Music Replay. And for those who aren't familiar with Spotify Wrapped or Apple Music Replay, it's basically when these platforms put together a playlist of the music you listen to most frequently throughout the year. Our last limitation being we only had college-age students, which limited our ability to gain more research and a better understanding from older participants as well as younger participants. And we came up with three future research recommendations, with the first one being to play music aloud for participants to listen to in real time. By doing this would evoke emotion, but also get reactions from participants about how they feel about that certain music. Our second recommendation being more direct on the subject, which is music and emotion. We found that through some of our interview questions, we weren't as direct on the subject as we intended to be. And then our last recommendation being this research could also be conducted using surveys, not just interviews.
So to wrap everything up, our main takeaways is music is impactful and music influences emotion. A lot of our participants said when they're listening to sad music, sometimes they want to cry and be more sad. So then they would cry and let everything out. And when they want to be happy and get hype in the morning, they listen to happy music. Whether you like it or not, music is with you throughout your day. And we just want to say, go out there and listen to some music.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shanna Valari, and this is my research about the difference in viewer immersion across movie platforms, in theaters, and streaming platforms. Specifically, we're going to look through and go in deep in the viewing environment, the streaming environment, and the audience environment as well. So this study is a viewer impact and immersion stratification and engagement on movies, and on the immersion on how the individual is immersed into the movie story itself, either in the theater or on streaming platforms, wherever they may be streaming from. They are mostly in the greater stratification of the more of the theater and the streaming platforms, and the rarer disease. But the important question is the dominant way of movie watching, but however it ranges streaming in ways streaming platforms have evolved today, and how it becomes a more issue of going to the theaters or watching on platforms. The major gap in this is the theatrical streaming engagement by focusing on the immersion of content and social environment, mostly being in the theater, being with other people you don't know or do know, or with streaming environments where you know people and also have the control. For the study, we use the uses gratification theory to measure how each individual is satisfied, which in the movie inversion itself. For the lit room, there was 4 constructs. The honest engagement was how emotionally involved the viewers are in the movie, and how that shows in the audience connection with the movie, meaning that how the viewer is more inversion in the movie or not. And then the viewing environment is where they are, so either in the movie theater or in the streaming platform environment. And the viewer as a third one is how immersion focus keeps the movie person in focus in the storytelling while they're watching a movie. That depends on where, it depends where they're in the theater or on the streaming platform. And then of course with social experience, that is shared experience watching the movies rather than can enhance the connection to enjoyment. Meaning it's how their environment and involvement and around the movie itself in their each travel environment. My 3 first highlights was the significant greater stratification of movies watching streaming platforms than watching movies in theaters. I found this not significant, meaning that both of them are the same in gratification and the same viewer strategy in both places. For my second hypothesis, watching the movie in theaters will leave a great environment commitment with higher audience engagement than watching on streaming platforms. Again, I found this non-significant. It was still equal across both viewing environments. I mean, they were still immersion, even though it had the same viewer commitment. For my whole hypothesis, viewers' satisfaction commitment is the audience engagement, and then the higher movies to watch in theaters than watching on platforms. Again, this is not found non-specific, and in the same levels for movie theaters and streaming programs are still the viewers' satisfaction commitment and audience engagement in total. For my methodology, it was a survey I conducted that will take 3 to 4 minutes to take. By sending it out via canvassing and Instagram stories, we had a final number of 98% rate. And the simple question, and more ones engaged in the survey was, in general, how engaged did you feel while watching the film? And more the immersion in the film itself. The participants, the final number was 89% people who took it, and between the ages of 18 to 65 or older. For my demographic, it was mostly females, and then 37, and then males being 24, and third gender is 90%. Well, it would be more than females than what I was supposed to be. While white are 78%, and other remote cultural. More specific is engagement watching in the theaters was 55%, and streaming was 35%, and other was 12%, which I found that very unique in this situation, making each of view environments more equal together, and people don't really prefer. For discussion, the audience engagement was not was just in the shape and more individual than viewing environment, making it slightly higher than not spectral. The viewing environment also had viewers sorted in streaming platforms, but also the evidence did not support that whether theater and streaming platforms were not that different. With every study, there's limitations. The convenience sample was generally localized to the school and not having more movie fanatics itself. And then also having the survey being introduced self-balances. And with the third limitation, there was a small sample that reduces such a repetition. For further research, I would like more future people be more democratic with more movie fanatics, and the movie genre in general maybe they be in different theaters or streaming, and for future research indicating how person affects intention in movies. For my two takeaways, there was no specific difference between audience engagement between movie theaters, and then the second one is both environments have similar satisfaction and commitment depends on more platforms making each theater experience and streaming platform movie experience the same. Thank you for listening.
Behind the scenes, we're joined with Dr. Chris Paul here. Chris was actually the person that we did this the first year together. So Chris, what were your initial thoughts about this idea of doing live research presentations?
It was a really innovative way to go about presenting that research, using technology, getting that message out there. It's great being able to be with other students live, but also being able to put that in a streaming context, and it's there for legacy purposes too.
That's awesome, and again, thank you to you for your willingness to do it. Finally, it's now the 9th year of doing this. How have you kind of seen the program grow and our department grow in those 9 years?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, it's out of French studio and into actually the midst of research day, and that's really great to be able to have that action happening.
Awesome. All right, we got a couple more presentations coming at you.
Hi, my name is Kayleigh Garrison.
And I'm Carly Dolan.
And this is our research presentation on music, identity, and algorithmic curation in the lives of college students. This study is all about how college students use music and algorithm-driven playlists, like platforms in Spotify and Apple Music, to express their identity, regulate their emotions, and navigate social circles. This study prioritizes college students' own voices and provides a unique insight into how music fits into their daily lives. The theory that we used in our project was symbolic interactionism to help us understand the way that music acts as a symbol for emotions, values, and social identities.
And then for our literature review, we had algorithmic identity cues, which included algorithmic playlists act as symbolic social cues, and emotional regulation, where students use algorithm-driven playlists as a shared emotional language, and everyday music and self-construction. Playlists are used as everyday tools.
We also found emotional regulation, where students use algorithm-driven playlists as a shared emotional language. This was seen as a way to navigate both personal stressors and social pressures. Our research question aimed to understand how college students describe the ways that they use music to navigate and shape their personal identities. This moves us on to our methodology.
For our methodology section, we had college students ages 18 to 25, and Apple Music and Spotify users, and regular music listeners. Our recruitment procedures included direct messaging and face-to-face interactions. We also had 12 interviews with an average length of 10 to 30 minutes. Our data was transcribed using Otter AI. And to analyze our data, we used thematic analysis. Our themes developed using repetition, reoccurrence, and forcefulness. And for our results, we had 4 themes. Music as a tool for emotional regulation and grounding. Participants used music to manage mood, reduce stress, and support focus in daily life. One participant said, "I feel like it determines my mood or helps keep a mood." Another theme was music as an expression of identity and personal meaning. Participants used music to reflect, understand, and communicate parts of their identity and personal experiences. One participant said, "My music taste is all over the place, just like me. And honestly, I just need music all the time."
Other themes that emerged from the data were navigating algorithmic curation, where participants engaged with algorithmic features on Apple Music and Spotify to discover new artists and new genres. Specifically, one participant said, "Spotify's Discover Weekly introduced me to so many new artists like Sabrina Carpenter and more." Social influences on music listening was our last theme that we uncovered. Participants' music listening habits changed or shifted depending on their environment or who they were around. For example, one participant said, "In public, around other people, it's so different from what I listen to by myself." This takes us into the answer to our research question. Our data found that college students describe using music to manage emotions, express their identity, and adapt listening choices based on social signs. Algorithm-driven playlists support these practices, but overall, they don't override personal preference. Although algorithms increase influence to exposure to new music, they don't fully replace individual tastes. This suggests that technology enhances rather than controls individuals' listening habits. And this brings us on to our discussion.
For our discussion, we had interviews. From our interviews, music plays a central role in how college students regulate emotions and manage daily stress. Students describe music as both an identity resource and a practical tool, showing variation in how strongly they tie music to their sense of self. Algorithm-driven playlists influence discovery and listening habits, but most participants emphasize personal control over their choices. These findings align with prior research on symbolic interactionism, showing that music and playlists function as shared symbols shaped by social and algorithmic cues. For our limitations, there was a slight gender imbalance with the small sample size that included 4 males and 8 females. We interviewed college students ages 18 to 25, and answers from broader perspectives were limited. Public perception may have influenced how people answered, which created some bias. In future research, we suggest an anonymous online survey with a numerical scale to reduce public perception bias, a QR code for recruitment and randomization, and to explore how culture shapes college students' music listening habits, including family, language, ethnicity, and backgrounds. And this brings us to our discussion.
Our research found two key takeaways that emerged from our data. Specifically, that college students' music listening choices are dependent on environmental factors and social circles, such as peer influence, shared settings, and situational context. And lastly, our second key takeaway was that music and algorithm-driven playlists play a central role in how college students express their emotion and form social identities in a formative stage of identity development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kayleigh Lane, and this is my research partner, Ryan Stock. Our research project our main goal of this study is to understand how social media users perceive different aspects of influencers and what draws them to follow influencers. In other words, we're looking at the why. Why do social media users choose to follow certain influencers that they see on social media? This research is unique because it takes on the perspective of the social media user. A lot of the previous research that we've looked at before doing our own research showcase the influencers themselves, but we chose to look at the perspective of the social media user. We used the gratifications theory, which explains that social media users are active when they're scrolling on social media, and that they use it to fulfill their psychological and social needs.
The first construct that we looked at was the personality of the influencer, which includes the attractiveness, expertise, trustworthiness, and likability of the influencer. We asked questions regarding each of these points and each of these aspects to the survey participants. The next construct we looked at was the gender of the influencer. We asked questions regarding what gender of influencers they follow, including an all of the above option. The third construct we looked at was the type of content, whether it be short form or long form content. The length of the content is an important construct to look at because everyone has a different length of which they watch their social media. For definition, we define short form content of anything below 1 minute. The final construct we looked at was the geographical location of the influencer. Proximity to the social media influencer can increase factors such as likability and relatability. These are our hypotheses. The attractiveness, trustworthiness, expertise, or likability of an influencer will lead to a faster increase in more people liking the influencer. We found this to be non-significant through a t-test. Our hypothesis 2 states, the gender of the influencer seen on an individual's For You page influences the likeliness the social media user will follow this influencer. We found this also to be non-significant through a t-test. Our post hoc hypothesis 1 states, the attractiveness of the social media influencer will increase the likability of the social media influencer. We found this to also be not significant. The method we used to collect our data was a survey. The survey consisted of 15 questions and 3 demographic questions. Data was collected for 2 weeks through word of mouth, social media posts, and emails. This study was approved by Longwood IRB. We studied college-age individuals aged 18 to 25. Our final N was 107. No responses needed to be removed or were removed. 100 total people filled out our demographic questions. The demographics of our survey included 58 males and 52 females. In regards to race, there were 73 white respondents and 21 black respondents.
For our discussion section, we would like to highlight 2 constructs that we've chosen, which are the gender and the attractiveness of the influencer. For the gender, we asked what on average is the gender of the influencer you choose to follow. And then for the attractiveness, we asked on average how attractive are the influencers you follow. We chose these to not be as significant, and we concluded that many people do not pay attention to both of these constructs. For limitations and future research, our first idea was that the age range of our participants should be bigger and that we should focus on the older demographic. We surveyed college-age students from 18 to 25, and we think that getting an older demographic would broaden our data. Our second idea is to expand more on the social media apps that we used. We focused on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, but I think for further uses we should do Facebook and Discord for our older demographics. And then we should add more context. For example, we should ask if people care about if the influencers are already famous or not, so that we can get a more broader range of data. For future research, we would have an idea to get survey results for influencers themselves, so we can get both the influencers and the social media users. We would also ask more questions about the social media users that they follow, more specifically their names, so that we could understand more of what they're talking about. And our third idea is to explain the genres of the influencers that they follow. A lot of the genres that they put in the open-ended questions, it was hard for us to understand as researchers, so I think in the future we would ask more for them to explain the genre. We have 2 key takeaways. Our first is that social medias are more open-minded when it comes to following social media influencers. In the beginning, we thought that they would hone in on one of the factors that we researched, but in reality, they focus more on the expertise and more constructs. Our second key takeaway is that social media users use social media to learn information about the desired topic, and they don't just scroll mindlessly. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our research study where we're going to be talking about the effectiveness of nostalgia in commercial marketing. My name is Alexandra Huerta.
And I'm Jose Ramos Flores.
So the reason behind our study is Jose and I are huge movie and television show fans, and so we really wanted to talk about consumer behavior and the desire to engage or purchase different products or services from brands when nostalgia is used in their marketing. So while previous research has shown that nostalgia is a great marketing tool, we really wanted to talk about how it affects people our age, college students. So for the theory that we utilized, it was symbolic interactionism.
This leads us to the themes we found in our literature review, beginning with the psychology of nostalgic marketing. Nostalgia is a very powerful emotion that invokes past memories from childhood, and marketing schemes uses to build trust with the consumers. Our second theme was nostalgia and consumer engagement relationship. This is the relationship between both the consumer and the marketing scheme, and how past memories and emotion can make a connection to the product. Our third theme for the literature review is differences in nostalgic response. This highlights the reactions and emotions or thoughts throughout that marketing schemes use in nostalgia, and how our participants viewed it through how they view it, how they feel it, and what they think about it. These three themes tie to our research question of how does nostalgia marketing influence consumer engagement with brands?
So for our methodology, we had 12 interviews where we conducted interviews with mid-sized university students from ages 18 to 22, and they were all avid television show watchers. Our recruitment procedures included text, email, and word of mouth. So the average length of these interviews were about 20 minutes, and we can transcribe the data through voice memos and their transcription tool. So to find our themes, we used thematic analysis, and the themes developed were using repetition, recurrence, and forcefulness.
This leads us to the themes in our results, beginning with recall. When we say recall, nostalgia invoked a range of emotions and memories from childhood to sensory recall, which encourage viewers to pay attention. Quote, having nostalgia within a commercial, it brings a population back together because you can talk about different elements with other people that you might have not thought about before, and you can make new friends because of it. End quote. Our next theme was increased engagement. This theme focuses on the idea that not every commercial is used to just boost sales. Some commercials are used to create a buzz or engagement through social media. Quote, if it resonates with them and people are talking about it and it starts circulating, you're going to get more eyes put on you as a brand, end quote.
Our next theme that we found was nostalgia influence, and nostalgia influences a consumer to go out and purchase through a built connection developed by a commercial containing nostalgia. One participant had said, I connect with it. It makes me want to go buy it. It gives me a connection to the product because it's common ground. Another was emotions while encountering nostalgia. Of course, there is a lot of emotions when encountering nostalgia. It could be happiness, longing, anger, and they experience this all while watching these commercials. Another participant said, a sense of happiness and being able to remember my childhood and all the great things I had growing up.
Our final theme in the results is nostalgia and self-reflection in commercials. As Alexander mentioned, some of the emotions were sad and anger, as usually it's cited that nostalgia is tied to the emotion of happiness and joy. This theme focused on the idea of the surprises that came with the reactions some of our participants felt when watching the videos, which they thought was going to be different when they first agreed to do the interview. Quote, consciously, it's probably not something that I'm thinking about, but subconsciously, I am 100%, end quote. This all of these themes ties to answer our research question, which is nostalgia allows and creates a shared cultural experience through different elements that taps through past memories. Even with no true connection, trust and engagement can rise between campaigns and consumers.
So for our discussion, we found two separate themes that a nostalgic reference increases the likeliness of engagement to connect to the brand. So consumers are becoming more familiar and they're more likely to want to engage, share with their friends, family, and overall that's great marketing for the business and company. So another one is consumers find brands more trustworthy when nostalgic references are used to bring together a community, a shared cultural experience, rather than a greedy motivation intent. So one person had noted it could be seen as manipulative to them, encouraging people to buy a product that maybe they don't need, but they're using a nostalgic reference to try and motivate them to do so, rather than bringing people together for joy.
This leads us to our limitations, beginning with the fact that we only chose commercials tied to the 2000s and 2010s, as opposed to including earlier references such as the 80s or 90s, which could have worked equally or better in terms to our participants. Our second limitations was interviewees not having a direct connection with the brand or product shown in the commercial, making it difficult for them to see how nostalgia can be a factor into it. Our final limitation was we had a couple of repetitive questions and lacked clarifying ones, which left participants feeling a bit confused or feeling like they already answered the questions. In terms of future research, we believe comparing different age groups can help be beneficial to understanding how nostalgia plays a factor to multiple different people, choosing a more specific niche such as movie brands or apps to get more specific information and results, and finally comparing different regions of the United States and how they respond to nostalgia in commercials is research that can be built upon to eventually reach global status.
So for our first takeaway, when a consumer has a personal connection with a nostalgic reference, the familiarity drives engagement. It creates a tie with consumers to the brand marketing campaign. And so for our second takeaway, even if people do not intend to buy or want to buy or maybe have any interest within the brand company, they are more likely to have a shared cultural experience, which means they'll share it with others and they'll be more motivated to want to learn more about the product. So we're really excited to get to explore this topic, and we would like to thank you all so much for listening. I'm Alexandra Huerta.
I'm Jose Ramos Flores. Thank you for watching.
Hello everyone, I'm Nick Jones.
And my name is Zach Caudell.
And today we will be presenting to you our study, Art Over Artist. This project looks at how people reason with art created by controversial artists. So, our study focuses on how audiences interpret their relationship with controversial artists, especially emotional responses, moral reasoning, and decision making. Our study is different, however, because instead of looking at just the numbers, we focused in on people's lived experiences and how they responded to them in their own words.
There were three main ideas from previous research that helped shape our study. First was parasocial relationships that showed emotional attachment and can make it harder to stop supporting an artist. Second, media, identity, and power influence, how people judge controversies. And third, moral discomfort happens when people enjoy content, but it conflicts with their personal values. We also had 2 research questions that helped guide our study. That was, how do audiences describe their emotional and ethical responses to controversial artists, and how do audiences justify separating or not separating from the art from the artist?
So for our method, we decided to go with a demographic of active consumers of entertainment media, but we had no strict demographic filtering. For our procedures, we had 12 interviews total with an average time of 10 to 15 minutes. We transcribed as we recorded their interview and used that via Otter AI. For our data analysis, we used thematic analysis to find themes developed in our research, focusing in on repetition, recurring themes or ideas, or forcefulness.
For our first results section, one of our first findings was that people interact with media in a very casual way, that being with everyday media integration, like listening to music or watching YouTube generally. Because of that, they tend to keep emotional distance from artists, even when controversies come up. Some even say, for example, I listen to music daily, I watch YouTube, it's a pretty large role in my life. Second theme was conditional separation of art versus artists. People don't fully separate from the artist or fully reject them either. Instead, the response is conditional, based on situations, such as with friends or in different contexts. For example, one person said, for me, it doesn't affect the way I look at the artist. I'm just here for what they put out.
Another thing that we came across was moral boundaries and drawing lines. Despite that flexibility in separating the art from the artist, nearly all of our participants described a clear moral boundary that they've set after engaging in that type of media. For example, we had a participant state that if there's any form of hateful treatment, that's a hard line for them when it comes to listening. As far as another theme, we found social media influence and normalization. Social media, it played a critical role in how participants became aware and interpreted this controversy. Nearly all of them identified platforms such as Instagram or TikTok or other general discourses on the internet as their primary source of information. For example, we had another participant state, I don't know who to trust, and that they take most of the information they see with a grain of salt.
We also had social peer influence. The social interaction between individuals was a very clear, highlighted role within shaping how they view art and the artists that make that art. For example, anything that I do know, I've mostly heard from my friends, or that we share the same opinions when talking about controversial artists within friend groups.
So, our big question was, how do people separate art from artists? Well, the findings indicated that the separation is indeed conditional rather than a solidified feeling. While some participants attempt to separate the art from the artist for the sake of their enjoyment, others found this controversy conflict with them strongly in their personal beliefs and values, and they found something directly within the artist's controversy itself.
So for our discussion, it shows the relationship with controversial artists is constantly being negotiated between individuals. They are influenced by emotions, moral judgment, and social context. And overall, media consumption is an active process. People are constantly interpreting content based on the identity and the values in which they associate themselves with.
For our limitations in research, we found that we had a small and kind of a similar participant pool where it kind of narrowed down the scope of our findings a little bit. The study also relied entirely on self-reported responses, which kind of led to a more selection of biased answers more than just objective. We had participants interpret controversy differently than each other, so that also skewed our findings in the process. As far as our future research goes, we would expand focus beyond entertainment to include, careers across, expand careers like politicians and service workers. We would also shift to a more quantitative approach for a more anonymous and potentially more authentic response. We would also follow participants a longer period of time to see how their engagement would shift over the course of that period of time. Our first takeaway that we would have is that audience engagement with controversial artists is shaped by emotion, morality, and content.
Our second takeaway from this study was that separation of art from artists is conditional and shifts based on values, severity, and social influence.
Thank you for watching. I'm Nick Jones.
And I'm Zach Caudell. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Hosterman, what did you think of those presentations today?
It was, every year they keep getting better and better. They're polished, they're in-depth, they're really, I was really impressed.
No, I was really proud of all our students and us for educators here. This is the culmination, right? It's very nice to be able to see all their hard work for this whole semester come together for this here. So, and there's someone else's hard work we need to mention, because of course all this would not be possible without one specific individual here. If we can cut to the camera right now, there he is in the shadows, Mr. Jace Frank. He spent 10, 12 hours setting all this up here. He would be very disappointed with the lighting of that shot. 10, 12 hours setting all this up here. We did practice yesterday here. Thankfully, we're all going to tear this down, so that'll be a little bit faster, but huge shout outs to Mr. Jace Frank, because without him, none of this would be possible here.
Thanks, Jace.
I also want to shout out all the students behind the scenes here. Kayleigh, McKayla, Christian, I can't see Aquila and Savannah back there. There they are. They are the ones who produced the second half of this. We did have another group who produced the first half of this. They're already living the dream here with the rest of their research day off. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next year for year 10.
Year 10.
So until then, thank you all. And subscribe.
Right.